Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, council, staff, and residents. I call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock, and looking at the table, we do have quorum. And at this point, I'd like to call on Councillor Eckert to read the land recognition statement.
Thank you. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor. As you know, that this is my first time chairing a meeting, so bear with us. And I'd also like to, at this point, welcome Bill Tigert, the acting town clerk, for the next 18 months. And this is Bill's first meeting with us, so hopefully it'll go smoothly, but if there's a couple of little bumps, just bear with us. Thanks. So at this point, we'd like to approve the agenda. Does anyone have any additions to or questions regarding the agenda at this point? Seeing none, I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Olson that be it resolved that the agenda for March 22nd, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. Beginning with the vote, Councillor Eckert.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Chair Wink.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And that brings us to disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare. Does anyone have a conflict? Seeing none, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next resolution we have before us, and it's moved by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Olson, that the agenda be amended to add the addendum being item 852. So if you're ready, I can conduct the vote, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, starting with Councillor Eckert.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair Wink.
Yes.
That motion too is carried. Thank you. So now we have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. And again, moved by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Olson. And I'll call the vote if everyone is ready. So again, Councillor Eckert.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And Chair Wink.
Yes.
And that motion is carried. Thank you. The next item we have on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is delegations. And our first delegation is the Fonthill Platform Tennis Club with the request for a lease renewal. And we have a motion moved by Mayor Junkin and seconded by Councillor Niznik. Be it resolved that the council receive the delegation from Terry Maliski, president of the Fonthill Platform Tennis Club, regarding a request for lease renewal for information. So I think now we call forward Mr. Maliski to do his presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Fonthill Platform Tennis Club and our need for a lease renewal. My name is Terry Malkowski. I'm the current president of our club. Purpose of the presentation is to discuss the renewal and answer any questions you may have. The club that we're discussing consists of 2 platform tennis courts, a clubhouse, approximately 20 parking spaces, and the land that it's on. A bit of background, it's located in the old arena grounds. It's been there for 30 years at the bottom 1120 Hayes Street. We're very proud to be celebrating our 50th year in Pelham. It's a great milestone for any organization. Just a bit about the sport, lots don't know about it. Platform tennis is primarily a winter sport. One of the very few outdoor activities in Pelham that can be played year-round. We have 100 full-time members with an additional 50 to 100 guests that use the facility, including high school students that use it as part of their physical activity program. We volunteer the club for that. Our members are aged 10 to 80 years old. We're very proud that we now have 3rd-generation members part of the club. The Humphrey family is one of those founding member, plus Rich and his sons are also members of the club. So great to see 3 generations enjoying the same sport in Pelham. We are a nonprofit organization. We're run by a board of volunteers, and the club has always paid for its own expenses out of the dues we collect from our members. So all of our operating expenses are performed, along with a lot of the work that's done at the club is done by volunteers who come out on Saturdays. We have a lot of handy people, construction people that come out and volunteer their time and put on their overalls and will work on the club as a volunteer. So it's a great model and a great spirit at the club to keep things going on a very low-cost basis. The club also pays property taxes to the town of Pelham. Our current situation, though, as I said, we pay all our own operating expenses, is that we need some major capital upgrades. After 50 years of keeping a club going, we're in a situation now that we need some major repairs. And we don't have those funds to perform those. So our intent and the reason why we're here today is to submit a grant application to the Ontario Trillium Fund capital grant program, and hopefully raise the money for these repairs there. It's about $150,000 is the max of that fund. That's what we'll be applying for. We applied for a capital grant in November of 22. We felt we had a very compelling application, and that was the feedback we got from the grant administrators through some of our coaching calls. However, we were disqualified because we didn't have a current lease in place with the town of Pelham for a minimum of 5 years. So we believe we were DQ'd on a technicality, but there was no going back once they made that decision and made their awards, and there was no overcoming that. You either have a signed lease that shows that you're viable for a minimum of 5 years, which makes sense. They're going to give out significant amount of money. They don't want you to be not viable in 1 or 2 years. So we need that minimum of 5-year lease in place and prove that it's signed and fully executed. We did have some letters that were a letter of intent that we would sign it. That wasn't good enough. So again, we need this lease so that we can apply again in May of 2023. So just in a few months, we want to have a lease signed so that we can resubmit our application. We're also open and asking the town for any of their guidance on our application if it can help us be more successful. Whatever we need to do, because any money we raise from Ontario Trillium will make it better for the town and for our club. So lease renewal, we're requesting a lease renewal from the town of Pelham for 10 years so that we have to watch that we don't go too short a period of time that, just 5 years is, and we miss another technicality. So we want to make sure we're beyond that from the time they make the awards. Or, we're open maybe 5-year terms with automatic evergreen renewals, something like that. So we don't have to keep coming back trying to renegotiate a lease every 5 years. So we're requesting 10 years, but to be discussed. We just have to watch that criteria in the application that we don't kind of miscalculate the date on that. The funding from the Ontario Trillium Fund will allow us to make the necessary repairs and upgrades so we can continue to support recreation and healthy lifestyle for the residents of Pelham, hopefully for the next 50 years through platform tennis. So thank you for all your support. That concludes my comments.
So thank you, Terry. Really, I was a member of the Platform Tennis Club a number of years ago and played for 4 years until I screwed up my shoulder a little bit, but the club runs very well. It's inclusive of anyone in the area, whether they're young or old, male, female. It's a great sport. I take my grandkids to the park frequently and walk by, and I see the clubhouse being in disrepair and definitely needs the money, and I know where you're coming from, and I think the courts probably haven't been resurfaced since I played, and that's been quite a while, so definitely needs some repairs. So thank you for your presentation. Any questions or comments from any other people on the council? Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the opportunity of showing me around the place the other day with the mayor. I think this is exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for in our community. Fitness, outdoor fitness, and especially in the wintertime like that. So, and I do endorse the idea of a 10-year lease, because I think that's going to be the kind of the saw-off point for making an effective presentation to Trillium. And I wish you the best of luck with that, because that's one of those things where you just keep applying until you get it. And you will get it, I'm sure. Thank you.
Councillor Niznik.
Good morning. Yes, thank you. I just wondered, I guess a question, if you do have a backup plan if the Trillium grant is not awarded, seeing that it does sound like it's in a bit of disrepair.
Not really. No, we don't have a plan B. Plan B would be to keep chipping away at repairs, prioritize them, and out of our dues of our members. But we want to keep it affordable for our members, and we don't want to make a big assessment on them of, with 100 members, we're talking hitting them all with a one-time maybe assessment of $1,500. That wouldn't fly with our type of membership. So no, we don't have a plan B except for to prioritize our repairs and just do it over a longer period of time. But as we do that, other things will continue to degrade, and it's just going to be kind of chasing our tail on that. So it really needs to just be brought up to standard so that we can carry on and just have our general operating expenses going forward.
Okay, any other councillors? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Terry. Obviously, I'm in the area. I walk by it and run by it and bike by it all the time. So I appreciate your presentation and the adaptation of the Platform Tennis Club to being a winter sport, but also you participate, people of your members participate during the summertime. I think it's excellent. Like Councillor Olson mentioned, I think the 10-year lease is the preferred option I have, because that ensures continuity, and that's important to me. So yes, I'll be definitely supporting your application. Thank you.
Mayor Junkin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Terry, again, for a great presentation. And as Councillor Olson mentioned, it was nice of you to take your time and show us around your facility. Very impressed with the initiative that your members show in keeping your facilities relatively up to date. As you say, you need some more money, so you need some help. I'm definitely for the 10-year lease. I'm also thinking that we have this one person on staff that's relatively good at writing grants and her department. So perhaps when you do reapply to the grant for $2 trillion, I'm sure that the CAO wouldn't object too strongly to using a little bit of staff time to take a look over it and dot any I's and cross any T's that your people may have missed. So I think that's a great idea to have town cooperation on that. But yeah, other than that, when Wayne and I were there, you had 4 members, I believe, using the courts, and I was quite impressed by the backflips they were doing. It was very impressive. Okay, thanks again for your presentation.
Thank you, and thanks for coming out and seeing the facility.
Okay, any other counselors? Seeing none. Thank you, Terry, for your presentation, and best of luck with the grant.
So, Chair Wink, we have a motion on the floor. If council's prepared, we can go ahead with the vote. Okay, starting with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr. Yes. Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And Chair Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Bill, you forgot Councilor Eckert.
Oh, I did too, so. Just testing the new council, so. Sorry, Councillor Eckhart.
Just checking to see if I was awake. Yes.
Thank you. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
So our second delegation this morning is on climate analysis and strategic planning. So again, I'm learning the ropes, so we'll put the resolution on the floor and then entertain the delegation, or do you want to wait?
Just bring the delegation. on,
Okay,
yes,
so
and
our
then we'll
first,
do the resolution.
yeah, so our first delegation on climate change, and I'm going to apologize in advance for mispronunciation. So it's Nima Vazandi Asehi. Close? I had some of the right letters. Yeah.
The last name, Asadi.
Asadi. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Nima. I'm here to do a presentation on my work over the last 2 years on the climate of the Niagara region. I apologize if it's a little rushed. There's a lot of information to get through and only about 5 minutes to get through it all. So to begin, as we all may know, the IPCC has been warning about an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels being an irreversible tipping point. Let's keep that in mind going forward into my presentation. So what's the purpose of my presentation? Well, basically it's to discuss the effects of weather and climate change at a municipal level as opposed to a global level, and to basically provide a solid foundation for formulating municipal policies. So let's take a look at that global temperature that we were talking about earlier. What I've done here is I've plotted out the global temperatures given by NOAA. And as you can see, I've divided it into 30-year chunks. The reason I did this is because when you're discussing climate, it's not a year-to-year basis, it's more of a trends basis. And a 30-year trend has been determined to be an appropriate climate cycle. So as you can see, when looking from the first climate cycle of 1900 to 1930 to the current climate cycle, it's been about an increase of 0.9 degrees Celsius. If we were to do a year-to-year analysis of 1900 to 2020, it would be more 1.1 degrees, just to demonstrate the difference of doing climate versus weather on that basis. Now, one thing to keep note of is that's global, so that means it's land and ocean combined. One thing to note is land has a lower thermal capacity than water, therefore land would heat up faster than ocean would. So when we're discussing local municipal level climate change, we have to more focus on land, as we don't really have oceans in Niagara. We have the Great Lakes, but that's not as much water as the oceans are. So let's focus on the Niagara region. In 2019, the new Niagara official plan was released, and within that paper, there was a very glaring line of Canada is warming at twice the rate of the global average. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Canada is all land and not land and ocean. It will increase faster, and if you actually divide the math up, you'll see that it is about twice as fast for land as it is for water. So the Niagara region, to focus on it even more, here is a map of the Niagara region with all the weather stations within the region. And because of the topography and the fact of the Great Lakes, I've divided the region into three: the North Tier, Central Tier, and South Tier, to better analyze the differences when you're under the escarpment, on top of the escarpment, close to the lakes. So for the full region, this is how the temperature breaks down. And as you can see from the first climate cycle to the current climate cycle, it's been about an increase of 1.8 degrees Celsius. For the region, that's already above that 1.5 tipping point. However, as I mentioned before, we are land and not land and ocean. I skipped ahead a little faster than I wanted to. So with temperature, what does that tell us? Well, one thing that temperature influences with infrastructure is frost days, which affect potholes and basically the well-being of the roads that we drive on. So let's look at the frost days. Frost days are when basically freeze-thaw cycles, or when the temperature goes above and below 0 degrees within a 24-hour period. And as you can see here, it's actually on a decreasing trend from the first climate cycle of 111 to the current climate cycle of 108 or 107.7. That's a change in 3.5 frost days on average from the climate cycles. That would indicate lower and lower freeze-thaw cycles as time goes on, with less potential for potholes to occur. However, as I mentioned earlier, we divide it into tiers. For the central tier, which is where Pelham is located, as you can see, the temperature is also on an increase, of a slightly higher increase of 1.98 degrees Celsius. And the frost days, when you look at the climate cycles, have increased as a result of the temperature increasing, as this causes more transition days during the winter season, as the winter will be closer to 0 degrees and it would transition more. However, if you're looking at the last climate cycle, you can actually see it's on a downward trend. So although it may have gone up, it's now going back down as a result of it getting warmer. So with temperature comes precipitation. As you can see, I've recorded the precipitation. I personally haven't measured it, but it's been measured from the past 120 years, from 1900 to 2020. And it's increased by about 109 millimeters on average from the first climate cycle to the current climate cycle. Now, what effect would this precipitation have? Well, one main thing is flooding and erosion, two main things. So let's talk about flooding. Right here, I have a picture taken in 2022 of Merrittville Highway, just right by the speedway. And as you can see, the road is flooding into the lane from the culvert on the side of the road, and cars have to avoid it to avoid potentially hydroplaning. Now, this occurred on a day where it rained about 21.9 millimeters over 6 hours. That type of event, when plotted on an IDF curve, or intensity, duration, frequency curve, determines whether it is a statistical storm, like a 2-year storm or 10-year storm. And when plotted on that, it actually falls below a 2-year storm. That is a regular rain event that has occurred and has resulted in a flooding onto Merrittville Highway. So it poses the question of when we see these, are they attributed to climate change or weather, and whether it should be handled as a result of, like, if this is a regular weather event, should it be something that we focus on to deal with to prevent future flooding, or if it's a climate change, or maybe it's a design issue with the culvert on the side of the road not being big enough to deal with the precipitation. These are the questions that we would have to look at to see how we can handle this type of potential issues with the changing climates in the region. Another thing I mentioned is erosion. One thing I noticed was on the news was that the Highway 20 Rice Road intersection has an erosion problem. And I noticed that even driving in today, it has been staked out for development. So it poses the question of, if we know that there is an erosion issue, should we really be building anything in the area that might in the future have problems as a result of the erosion? It's these types of things. I'm here to help with the information that I've gathered to answer questions about where it would be the best to develop, where we need to focus on for maintaining development, and so on as the climate changes into the future. So in conclusion, the purpose of this presentation was to help distinguish the difference between weather and climate, that you shouldn't look at year to year, you should look at trends across time, and also to develop a foundation for future weather and climate analysis work to be done. And thank you. I hope I didn't go over the 5 minutes.
Thank you for your presentation, Nima. It was very thought-provoking, and we all know that climate change is an important issue that has to be dealt with, and we've got to mitigate it as much as possible. So any questions from councilors? Okay, Councilor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you, and thanks for your presentation, and thank you for sharing your learning with us, because we like to be included in those kind of things, and you're very welcome to be here. And you selected exactly probably the most sensitive part of the 12 Mile Creek with your observations about the markings on the ground, because that exact corner there has been identified by Trout Unlimited and a number of people as a key point there. And we are taking action with the erosion there, and that will get repaired to the extent it can be. But you pointed out something important to us about the rate of climate change and the things that we're working on. And you're right. I think a lot of the where the rubber meets the road is at the municipality, and we've seen the effects of on our infrastructure of our gray infrastructure, at least, of climate change and the amount of water and snow we get and the breakup. So I appreciate that very much for you saying that, and thank you to you and the university for being here. So,
thank you.
Any other councilors? Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Asante, for your presentation and the information you provided. I particularly appreciated that you had Pelham distinguished from the rest of the municipality, because we think we're at the top of the hill. So that makes that. The question I always have about climate change has to do with the statistical accuracy of the data you're presenting and how accurate you think it is. Because the reason why I'm asking the question is that I feel that the statistical issue on climate change are very similar to other big data problems of complex systems in the social and natural environment. And therefore, a lot of results or analysis or models are ascertained based on that statistical data. And obviously you showed us all the weather points where you're taking that, and those points determine what your statistical numbers show. So what do you think your statistical accuracy is of the data you're presenting to us today is?
That's a great question. Thank you. So to answer your question, yes, you're right. There's always a statistical drift. So I did my best to handle it by cleaning the data. So when you're looking at the weather station data, if you look at the raw data, you'll notice a lot of gaps, a lot of missing data, which, to your point, would result in a bias or statistical skew. So I worked to remove any month in my data set that was missing 5 days in a row of data or 8 random days across the month. And then if a month was missing in a year for that station, I would actually remove that year to avoid any bias towards if it has more warmer months than colder months, it would push the temperature to say it's warmer than it actually is, and vice versa. If it has more of the colder months than warmer months, it would push it to show that it's colder. So I would remove that year from that station and compensate with the surrounding stations that did have those years in order to avoid any potential bias or skewing into my data. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes. What I really wanted to know is, did you take it into did your analysis evaluate whether it was accurate or not, and did you do something to compensate for it? So
yes.
Thank you very much. That does answer my question.
We also did a little bit of analysis using the global data and the global land data in particular, just to make sure that the trends we see are reflected in the data as a whole from NOAA. And actually on NOAA's website, you can download data for Canada, and I'll kind of use that to help calibrate my data and see if it is accurate or if it has some inaccuracies in it. And I found that my data was accurate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Like Councilor Olson mentioned, I too appreciate the fact that we have had climate change events, and it is affecting our area. And thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other? Yes, Mayor Junkin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you again for your presentation. Being involved in agriculture my entire life, I can attest firsthand that the storms are getting perhaps more frequent, and the thing that seems to be happening is a lot more isolated storms. Coincidentally, that the storm you showed on Merrittville Highway, I remember that day quite well, because I heard the thundering and I saw the lightning, and even though I only live 2 miles west of that intersection, we didn't get any rain at all that day. And meanwhile, a friend of mine lives at that intersection, and it was 1.5 inches of rain in about 20 minutes. So that's something else that municipalities, I don't know how you actually plan for something like that when you get such isolation, right? I mean, it's crazy. It's interesting, your thinking, reasoning that because of the stormwater pond and the problems we've had there, that to question whether we should indeed be developing that piece of property at that intersection. And again, I think that it's a difference between whether I hate to say common sense, but it definitely means that we have to be more careful. I don't think it's logical that we can take a piece of ground that's that expensive and that is already being serviced and say, no, we're not going to develop on that. But I think by looking at these studies, we have to be more careful, and we can't just pave everything over and let the water go without trying to restrict it and mitigate that flow to slow it down. So in that way, it's good to have these studies, and I think the municipalities, and Pelham especially, has done a lot, became more aware of our water and what our development is doing to the area watercourses, and we are indeed doing a better job of instituting engineering solutions as this development takes place. So I really appreciate the fact that how you tried to tie that all in. Again, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I did want to comment on a couple of the points you made. So for the Merrittville Highway, you mentioned the localized weather storms and how would you handle that. One thing I noticed is that's actually not the first time that happened at Merrittville. I have a couple other pictures that just for the sake of time I had to cut from the presentation where it has flooded multiple times throughout 2022. And one thing I noticed is a lot of times the water that's flooding into the roadside gutter and onto the road, it has a very high sediment load, which makes me think that it might settle into the roadside gutter and slowly lower the capacity of the gutter over time. One thing I was thinking, and it would have to be looked into, is proper maintenance of the gutter, cleaning it out of the sediment load on a regular basis to keep the capacity as what it was when it was first designed. It may have been designed with these storms in mind, but over time it fills up and it can no longer handle that. And then for the Rice Road development, you mentioned that about just the fact that the land is there and it makes no sense to not use it. My concern would be that with the erosion there, any house you build is always at that risk of undercutting or something occurring to damage the property. And I'm not sure if it's going to be a house. I'm not sure what the plan is, but assuming it is a house, the resident would suffer in the future as a result of the house being built on land that's a higher risk. And I mean, at the end of the day, when that happens, the insurance will cover it, but the insurance is paid for through the tax money, I would imagine. I just, for the taxpayers' benefit, I was hoping that it would be something that could be looked into, and perhaps even in cases where houses are built on a higher risk land, perhaps premiums are higher for the insurance and the homeowner is made aware to avoid any issues on your end when something potentially happens.
If I may, Deputy Mayor? So again, I think it's a valid point, that's for sure. And especially in Pelham, we have very erosionable soils, very sandy fertile soils too, I may add. So yeah, it's definitely, I believe that when we do the site plans and when we do the drainage scales. As a matter of fact, if I could, I'd like to turn to our Director of Planning. Perhaps Ms. Weens, you can go into a little bit of detail of how we take the rainfall and drainage patterns in effect when we ask for site plan applications.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Certainly, that site has been one that we've identified. It does have a top of bank, and so there is a very small area that is developable. And the requirements are that there has to be a certain setback from the top of bank in order to develop on those lands, so you don't put any outward pressure on the bank and create more sloping and slumpage. There would be the requirement for geotechnical studies to determine the stability of that bank before any development would occur, and then that might inform information on, the foundation and constructability of that site. So all of that is taken into consideration before we give any approvals for any development on that site. There used to be a house on that property. It was demolished around 2011 or 12, thereabouts, but it has been vacant since then.
Great, thank you. So again, going back to your presentation, we definitely are aware of that soil and what the added rainfall, if not problems, well, let's call them problems, but we are identifying solutions to calm down the erosion and hopefully minimize the damage that water, ultimately collected water, that is going to be set forth on the 12-Mile Creek in that particular instance. So we are aware of it, but it is nice to be reminded that the rainfall is higher, and it's something that we will have to continue to look at in the future. Thank you again for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're going to let you off the hook now, Nima. So thank you very much for your presentation, and best of luck in your future studies, and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we have a resolution moved by Councillor Eckert and seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the Council receive the delegation from Nima Asadi, Research Assistant and MSc candidate at Brock University Department of Earth Sciences, regarding climate analysis and strategic planning for information. So if Council's ready, I'll proceed with the vote. And although it's been a long time since I've been in finance, I will try to count to 7 on this one. So, beginning with Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Next item on the agenda, we have a delegation from another candidate at Brock for his MSc, and it's Pierre Simigadnowski. Close? Oh. Thanks. And your presentation regarding best practices for anticipating weather and climate events.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So what I will present today is actually the continuation from what Nima has presented earlier from his foundation. So I will take climate change and look into the future with it. He has looked at what has happened from 1900 until present day. I will more focus on which models to look at, which ones do we pick, and what information do those models give us. Now, to start off, there is an obligation to protect the people of the Niagara region against potential climate hazards, and also to prevent those hazards for having a substantial economic impact here in the Niagara region. It's well known for, I would say, the wineries and vineyards. they're a substantial part of the economy, and so protecting them is very important. And now the goals of this presentation, the first will be to find an appropriate regional climate model to use for further studies into the future. And secondly is to implement adaptation and mitigation strategies. Now, there was the new Niagara official plan, which was released in 2019, and there are a couple of mission statements I want to focus on. And the first is the top quotation there. And in bold is to grow and protect the community into the future. And second, below that one is also to develop policies. And these need to be put in place to kind of prevent and mitigate what is to come. And I will focus more on warmth and heat. That has been a big killer, as we have seen the devastating heat wave in BC in 2021. Cold days here in the Niagara region, Nima didn't have time to show, but they have been decreasing, which I'm a fan of that because I'm not a fan of the cold. Now, I want to go over one important point beforehand, and that's accuracy and precision. When we look at a model or a set of models, it can be very confusing to know which ones to pick. And so we don't want, I guess that would be not accurate and not precise, as if you're playing darts and you hit all those X's. We wouldn't want, accurate but not precise either. That is not good enough. Opposite of that is being precise but not accurate. We want something, a model in this case, that is both accurate and precise. Now, what does this mean? Now, when we look at models, so on here, this graph, the black line is the annual mean temperature in the Niagara region. And all the other colored lines and behind it, it's a little hard to see on the screen, but there are 19 of them. They're all separate models. Now, when we deal with them, we deal as an ensemble, which means we take the average of the group of models. But if we break it down into each individual one, it would look like that. And the question to be asked is, which one do we pick? And so if you take the trend of these models, they go from 1950 until 2021. The black line here is the trend for the Niagara region, and all other colored lines is a trend of the model. So, this line closely resembles what has happened in the Niagara region from 1950 to 2020. Now, of that one, it's close enough. But then if we put all 19 of them, you can see that there's they're all over the place, pretty much. It looks like a nice rainbow. And so which one do we want? So I have evaluated 19 models for the Niagara region, and I have found which one fits what was historically observed in the region best. And I would like to point out some numbers for this one. And so from 1976 to 2005, I will have two different numbers. So when looking at mean temperature, what is in brown for mean temperature is actually from the Town of Pelham Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan. So from a model, they have found that it was around 9 degrees from the average 1976 to 2005. But what was historically observed was 8.8. And then 2021 to 2050, those are projections from a model. Again, the brown numbers are from the Town of Pelham Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan, which used an ensemble of models. So they used 19 or more models and took the average, while I found the one that really fit Niagara's historically observed trend line best. And so there are some differences, and it's important to have the model that is more accurate and precise once again. And looking to 2071, 2100, it's far into the future regardless of what models you have. There are a lot of uncertainties when you look over 50 years or more. But one thing to point out that is important to look at are hot days per year. So this is when a day is 30 degrees or more, when it reaches that point. And so you can see it has increased a lot. So it's 26 on average from 1976 to 2005. It's planning on almost doubling until the next climate cycle. So we're looking at those 30-year intervals from 2021 to 2050, and then increasing again from 22 days for, until 2100. Now, there are the definition of hot days from the Environment of Canada. This is slightly different. It just means that not only does it reach 30 degrees in that same 24-hour period, but also the lowest temperature during the night will be 20 degrees or more. There's some variations in the definitions, but this one has, more than doubled, or is planning to more than double from 1976 to 2005, from the climate cycle of 2021 to 2050, and so on. And lastly, one more criteria I want to look at are heat waves. So these ones are defined by Environment Canada, and it's when there are 2 true hot days or more in a row. And we've all experienced heat waves, and they're not pleasant, and they can be quite dangerous. And they're planning on, doubling from 1976 to 2005 to 2021 to 2050. So when taking the best model for the region and looking at the numbers into the future, even just 5 years, there's no, I would say, you wouldn't have to go 50 years into the future, even 5 years from now. What can we do with that? How can we deal with it? And so some conclusions and recommendations. One, if we're experiencing warmer temperatures, increase in hot days and heat waves, planting more trees is a necessity. Not only do they, they provide shade, but they provide us with oxygen. And, along roads, if trees are cut down, they can be cut down for a lot of reasons. They can be sick, or they can be infested with a bug. But if they are cut down, to make sure that more trees are planted, so that if one tree, that's this wide and that provided, this much area of shade, that we plant, maybe 5 or 6 trees equal to that amount of shade that it provided. Another one is climate-sensitive subdivisions, which can be put in place. This would mean, for example, during the wintertime, having houses that face, have windows facing the south side so that the sun comes inside. It would, reduce heating bills. It would also make it warmer throughout the day. Another one would be paving over less area. As Nima pointed out, a lot of flooding and increased precipitation. In order to prevent that, having more lawns and more trees can help mitigate that risk. And also limit drive-throughs. So this is actually to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we release as a municipality. And I say limit drive-throughs, not entirely take them out. So instead of going through a drive-through and waiting, so I've seen drive-throughs with the lineup going all the way, 50 meters down to the road. There is no need really to wait in a car, especially in the summertime when it's nice. And so limiting that can reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we emit. And so in conclusion, really, we want the best data to find the best projection, and this will have the best mitigation solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. Another thought-provoking presentation. Really appreciate your efforts on this. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Kerr.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciated your presentation. I've been involved since 1997 with winter temperature injury in vineyards. In fact, was part of the original development of the vine alert system for grape growers. Summer temperatures have never been a major issue in many cases for agriculture, for perennial crops. I will say they can be for cash crops and others, but for perennial crops, be they tree fruit or whatever. What has been most serious of an issue are incidents of spring frost, fall frost early, but also adverse winter effects. We've had freezes that has caused significant injury in the grape and wine industry across Ontario. I'm dealing with it as well in Nova Scotia now and in BC, some severe events. But in Ontario, the frequency was roughly 1 in 10 years. You were going to expect to get throttled by a major low temperature event. And I guess I'm looking at most of your data is looking at this slow escalation of temperature through the growing season, but it hasn't built into how can we work with mitigation of these severe weather events, recognizing that our average winter temperatures, and especially this winter was probably a great example of showing much lower than average snow, but when we did get it, it came in a rather serious storm event, as well with some severe cold temperature events. And dealing with perennial crops, we're looking at acclimation of plants and deacclimation and how they handle winter and things. So I guess my comment is more revolving around this is taking half the year, and that if we're going to really truly look at climate and mitigation and things, we need to be looking at the entire year as a whole, recognizing. I was given an age-old statement back when I first started in the 1970s, and it said, I can grow anything anywhere for one season. And what that meant was, that's fine, but it wasn't going to survive winter. And these are, I guess it's just something that hopefully, I appreciate your data, and it's good that also looking beyond the parameters of that singular part of the growing season. You had made comment about the winery side, and that's what triggered my thoughts, but I deal with the tender fruit industry and the pome fruit industry and others. So I think it's great. I appreciate your information, and it's the kind of stuff that we still have to keep digging at. Like I said, I've been at it for 40 years, and it just seems like I find more questions than I do answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's often the case, when we always have more questions than we have answers. But while we're on the topic of wineries right now, my thesis actually involves looking at doing a comparison of wineries in Nova Scotia and Niagara region and BC. So hopefully, once that's done, the information will be made public, and I'll have answers to those questions.
I appreciate hearing that. The major dilemma is that roughly 90% of the grapes in Nova Scotia have been frozen this year. So they're scrambling, won't be any crop. And I received calls from British Columbia and the Okanagan Valley, and they're looking at probably 50% crop or less this year. Mm-hmm. So you're acquiring data maybe a little more limited this year than in past.
Yeah, a lot of the times with wineries, as you mentioned, there are those weather events, those freak storm events, and even though the temperature has steadily been warming, since 1900 and is projected to keep warming furthermore, there will always be that, as you said, almost every 10 years there's a major event that causes major loss in yield for grapes. But with warming temperatures in the Niagara region, and then, it might be the same case for Nova Scotia, maybe that 1 in 10 years will become 1 in 15 years and 1 in 20 years. So those events will still happen, but hopefully at a lower frequency, that it will have less of an impact.
So any other councilors? So Councilor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, I'd like to thank the speaker again for your presentation, Pierre. And I think if I try real hard, I can probably remember what the summer of 1950 was like. It was but you're not here to listen to an old man reminisce about the weather in 1950. But economies and communities that rely on the land and the water and the climate to survive, it's important to us, and it's certainly important to Pelham to hear your message today. And there was an economy, there was a sustainable economy here for 10,000 years that lived within its means, and then the new technology arrived, and we need to be reminded of our indigenous friends would look at it as the 7 generations ahead of us. So to take that into account, but there's also inequities created by climate change, and I think it's important that you bring this forward, because there are people that are being left behind by climate change, and they're always the same people that get left behind. It's generally the older people and the people who don't have the means to keep up with things and supply air conditioning and that type of thing. And I look at your work as an effort to mobilize the community and energize it in the proper direction. I'm pleased to see that both of you are here today, because you know, how you capture the imagination of the community, and people will get behind you. We've seen that a lot of places, and especially in Pelham here, because people will get behind you and support you. So I wanted to add that to my thanks and the hope for the future as well, because we owe it to everybody to do this.
Thank you. Yeah, these types of studies really highlight not only areas, but people at risk,
Yeah.
especially those, as you said, that maybe now have air conditioning for the summer. It's important to look at that aspect.
Any other councillor? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Per, for your great presentation. I made a checklist for myself of items I was hoping you would touch on, and you touched on many of them. Indeed, model selection to me was important. The ensemble model, and the fact that you dealt with 19 different ones, I thought I really appreciated, because obviously the model and the number, you can take whichever one you want to produce the results you want. And that happens a lot of times in different things like this. The other thing was the linkage between the submodel process, like the evolution of social movements and the emission rates. And I think that was excellent. The complexity of issues and how to model and gain an empirical understanding of evolving feedback, I thought was also very intuitive by you. So I appreciate it, and thank you so much. And like the other councillors have mentioned, there's many different avenues and information that all of us need to go forward with this very important topic. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I would like to point out too is that a lot of times in climate studies, the models that are being evaluated, they usually only cover land. So, for example, the models that I picked, the ensemble, the individual models that come from the ensemble, which I found, actually take into account the effects of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie on the region, while a lot of models don't even include, how do you say, I guess, a lake model. So it's as if, where Lake Ontario and Lake Erie is, it's just land. So that's also why the ones that were being evaluated were also, I guess, special in their own way, because they included, a lake effect.
That's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so Pierre, thank you so much for your presentation. A lot of thought-provoking ideas in there, and again, as with Nima, I wish you all the best in your studies and the best of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Chair Wink, we have a resolution moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council received the delegation from Pierre Simagonichski, research assistant in MSc candidate, Brock University of Earth Sciences, regarding best practices for anticipating weather and climate events for information. Okay, so if you're ready, I can begin with the vote. Go ahead. Thank you. So starting with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just would like to bring forth a motion to amend the agenda and slide up 10.1.4 out of respect for our guests today, so they can carry on with their day if we can address that issue.
So do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hildebrand? Any other comments with respect to the motion? Seeing none, can we put it to a vote?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So beginning with Councillor Niznik for the amendment to the agenda to bring forward 10.1.4, the Fonthill Platform Tennis Club lease agreement renewal. We'll begin with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
So that motion is carried. Just give me 1 second to find it. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Eckhart and seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2023-0075 Recreation Fonthill Platform Tennis Club lease agreement renewal for approval, and the Council authorize and direct staff to negotiate a lease agreement with Fonthill Platform Tennis Inc., and that Council approve funding in the amount of $25,000 plus applicable taxes for the installation of a sanitary sewer and water service from the Platform Tennis Club facility, funded from the water and wastewater reserves. Staff will review the two options available and choose one of the following options. One, either provide services from Wellington Road, or two, service it from the new development. Over to you for discussion.
So any discussion from any of the councilors? Just looking at the report, it refers to many references to a 5-year lease agreement. I think comments before were from council's preference would be a 10-year. Any comments with respect to the length of the lease? Yes, Councillor Eckert.
Yeah, I would be in support of a 10-year lease. I think Terry brought up a good point. Depending on the timing of your grant application, you could fall short of the 5-year, and if you present an application to the Trillium Foundation that you're in the 4-year mark now, because we only granted a 5-year lease, you could be denied again, and that's going to put you another year behind. So I think if we're going to commit to this, we should commit to the 10.
Councillor Nisnik.
Yes, I can also be in support of the 10-year, and I just want to thank staff. I did have several questions with regards to the parking and the new subdivision, as well as the lease agreement and recovery of costs, sewer costs, that sort of thing. So feel confident that staff will work with the Platform Tennis to come up with a lease agreement that's beneficial to them as well as to the town. And now I have a deeper understanding that at one point you have already paid for sewer and water at one point when it was first connected, and then the town had to disconnect it when the removal of the arena was done. So thank you, staff, for clarifying those issues for me, and we can move forward. I'm confident with that. Thank you.
So, Mr. CAO, would we need an amendment to the motion presented?
No, to the chair. I think staff can take that as direction. That being said, I don't think it would be remiss for staff to suggest to you that perhaps council turn its mind to whether a term of 6 years or 7 might not also serve both parties' needs. What I can say is I remain a somewhat newcomer to the community, and what I can say is we've only had excellent relations with this organization, so there are no underlying tensions. But going more than 5 years makes some sense. If it's 6 or 7, then that gives the club both the opportunity to apply now and then for, say, 2 more years of grant applications, because maybe it'll be partially successful, right? The real challenge is what happens if you get 30 cents on the dollar or 40 cents on the dollar in the applications. If it's a 6-year term or a 7-year term, then even if it's a 5-year term, but if it's a 6 or 7-year term, then during the next term of council, this body has to turn its mind to the situation again, and it won't allow for benign neglect, because right now there is a building that does have some structural challenge, and if it's 10 years, it might not get discussed at all during the next term of council, and if the organization is unsuccessful, I don't think we should punt down the field that far or that long. And that's why staff were at the lower end, to make sure that this matter not be constantly, it would provide the bare minimum needed, hopefully for success with Trillium, but it also keeps the issue live and not sort of a distant thing. So we actually think it would be in both parties' best interest to ensure that this sort of remain live and a functioning source of discussion. And so if you go with a lower number that forces the next council to address the matter directly, we think there's some benefit to that, particularly in the event, the unfortunate potential event, that the club is unsuccessful in its grant applications. And we also took direction that we will absolutely assist with those applications. So if you consider 6 or 7 years rather than 5 as the minimum, and perhaps 10 was the max, that there's a happy medium in there that might serve everyone's interests. But with that, we're happy to take your direction. That said, if you have some disagreement, then you really should have a vote on that. And you may as well make the amendment and have a vote so we have specific direction.
So I'll throw it back to council and what their thoughts are on the 10-year as opposed to 6 or 7, and leave it up to staff to work with the club. Yeah.
Yeah, after the input from the CAO, I appreciate that. I think the direction to staff should be to negotiate a lease that benefits everyone involved, and we don't limit them to 5 or 10, but somewhere in between there. If that's the best, I'm sure the club will want to get what's best for them as well, and same for the town. So I appreciate the CAO's comments, and I would have no objections to that, to negotiating a term somewhere in between there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Niznik, you had brought the 10-year forward.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, then I'll rescind that.
Perfect.
And I'm comfortable with moving to the town negotiating between 5 and 10-year lease.
So, Councillor
Does that
Kerr?
make sense? Then a motion?
I concur with that. I think if we look at the recommendation, it's just council authorizes and directs staff to negotiate a lease agreement with the Fonthill Platform Tennis. It doesn't have years specifically attached to it, so I think we've got to give them credit for coming up with the best interest for everybody.
Yes, good comments. Okay, so I think we are ready for the vote.
Thank you. So the resolution has been read. I'm ready to proceed with the vote then. Okay, beginning with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Thank you.
Okay, and at this point in time, I think it would be appropriate to do a 5-minute recess for a bio break, and we'll be back at, why don't we call it 10:15. There we go.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes.
That clears the room.
And they won't all come back.
He just wanted to give the mayor a chance.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Terry.
That was good, yeah.
We'll have to put it in the record.
Do we have to comment on that? Yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt that the mayor had another appointment. So that's fine.
Yeah, my professor was behind that.
Yep, how much more?
Thank you.
Okay,
I'm so good.
Actually, you guys should put it in. Okay, let me, I'm in a meeting this morning, so I'm back at 2. I might be able to do it just after the lunch hour.
Testing.
Okay, so we'll continue to proceed. Just please make note that Mayor Junkin has left to a previous commitment that he had to go to, so I'll turn it over to the clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we're at item 6 on the agenda, the adoption of council minutes.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. We're just reloading the live stream, so if you just provide me one moment.
That's good. I didn't nail that anyway, so.
Yeah, we'll stick with one.
Take 2.
That's right. Oh, technology.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you. So again, for the record, Mayor Junkin has left the meeting for a previous planned commitment, so we'll turn it over to the clerk to continue on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wink. So we're at item 6 on the agenda, the adoption of council minutes. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Niznik and seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. RC-05/2023, Regular Council, March 1st, 2023. Turn it over to you for discussion.
So, council, any errors or omissions with respect to the minutes? Seeing none, to the clerk.
Thank you. I'll proceed with the vote, starting with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. We now move to item 7 on the agenda, and that's any requests from council members to lift an item from the consent agenda for separate consideration.
So any councillor wishing to lift an item? Seeing none?
Moving to agenda item 8, be it resolved, we have a motion moved by Councillor Eckhart, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on March 2022, 2023 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained herein be approved. So I'll turn it over to you, Deputy Mayor Wink, to deal with the items.
So if anyone's got any comments, so we'll do it in sections. So anything through 8.1 through to 8.4, any comments that councilors would like to make? Seeing none, we'll move to 8.5 through to 8.6. Any comments? Seeing none. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You probably looked this way.
I was a little too quick.
That's okay. Thank you. I just wonder if we should just discuss 8.5.2, the City of Welland report with regards to the YMCA? Or are we doing that later?
Well, we received the report, but there's another item with respect to the Y under 10 points.
Oh. Okay, we'll do it that way then. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments with respect to 8.8? Seeing none, to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So calling the vote now. Beginning with Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Now moving to staff reports. (10.1.1) Special event permit application, DeVries Fruit Farm, Mother's Day Market 2023. And I believe our deputy clerk will speak to that. The resolution, do we deal with that first?
You can read the resolution.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Niznik and seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved, the council receive report 2023-0061, special event permit application, DeVries Fruit Farm Mother's Day Market 2023 for information, and that council authorize and direct the town clerk to issue a special events permit for the DeVries Fruit Farm Mother's Day Market event on May 13th, 2023, subject to the approval of the town clerk, Director of Public Works, Director of Community Planning and Development, Fire Chief, and any other applicable agency upon receipt of satisfactory drawings, plans, permits, or other such documents as requested. And that special event permits include any such conditions of approval as requested by the said approval agent or departments and or agencies, and that council waive all licensing and fee requirements pursuant to bylaw number 3186/2011 for craft vendors only in lieu of a $150 fire inspection fee payable to the town of Pelham prior to the issuance of the permit.
Okay, thank you. So any comments or discussion? Seeing none, could we call the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So beginning with Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Moving now to item 10.1.2. I have a motion moved by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Be it resolved that council receive report 2023-0068, planting of a 4-meter wide wildflower buffer at River Estates Park for information, and that council approve the planting of a 4-meter wide wildflower buffer between River Estates Park and the stormwater management pond.
Okay, any comments or discussions with Councillor Eckert?
Just a question. So when we were on our bus tour, and we went by, I believe that's the same park, where there was some, I think Mr. Cook was describing that it was cut too close, down too much. Is this designed to assist in that kind of a warning track kind of a thing to assist around that stormwater? Is that, other than the beautification, of course, but is that one of the purposes of this?
So Director Marr?
Yes, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So that's correct. The last council had approved a resolution to install a snow fence temporarily to provide a buffer between the park area and the stormwater management pond. At that time, council passed a resolution to leave that fence in place until such time that a natural vegetation has grown to provide more of a physical barrier. The existing grass there is a natural turf grass. It will take many, many years to become naturally create a barrier. So basically the request is, or the ask is to go in and put in almost like a pollinator type garden made of natural species, which would grow quicker, probably over the next year or two, and allow us to remove that snow fence. So it would provide two functions. It would provide more of a physical barrier between the pond and the playground, and also provide some natural habitat for butterflies and stuff like that. So that's the intent.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes, thank you. So just a bit of a concern with regards to it being called Wildflowers Garden. Just wondering if that would be actually more of an attraction for little ones to go in and pick the wildflowers. So if it's more of the grasses and more a dense growth that you're planting, that would be fine. My only concern is that if it's the wildflowers, that the little ones would actually be drawn there. So I have had my grandchildren playing there, and witnessed other children playing there as well. Usually they're very well supervised by adults, so that's not an issue so much for the little ones wandering down towards the pond, but I guess my concern would be the ones, children who are maybe 7 to 11 years old who are not supervised by parents, still wandering down towards that pond. So I understand the snow fence will stay in place until the vegetation has grown tall. So just, if you could research maybe some other taller grasses and things like that that grow quickly rather than wildflowers.
So to the director.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So yeah, we will look at different species that will create more of a buffer area, and it will be naturalized plantings. It won't be pretty flowers. There will be some naturalized plantings there for sure. One of the other things I want to bring to council's attention is that we are in the process of doing a stormwater management pond facility review. As part of that review, looking at all our stormwater management ponds, the consultant will be providing recommendations with respect to best practices for fencing when required, or what type of protection measures to put in place. That study we're hoping to bring to council later this calendar year, and that may provide some more details, but in the meantime, we thought that this was a good resolution to the issue, and then depending on what that report says moving forward, we can make some more informed decisions on what we do with our stormwater management ponds.
Okay, great to hear. Thank you.
So any other councillor with comments? Seeing none, to the clerk.
Thank you. Proceeding with the vote then, starting with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
So that motion is carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 10.1.3. I have a motion moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2023-62, the execution of a subdivision agreement, Emerald Trail, file number 26T19-01-21, and that Council direct staff to prepare the bylaw to authorize the execution of the subdivision agreement for final approval of Emerald Trail subdivision.
So any discussion with respect to this item? Seeing none, to the clerk.
I'll proceed with the vote, starting with Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. So moving now to item 10.1.5, as we previously dealt with 10.1.4, I need a mover and seconder for this. You good with the motion? Are you good seconding? Okay, thank you. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kerr. The potential funding options for Pelham YMCA 2023-063 Chief Administrative Officer, that the motion will be amended to insert option number when selected. Either option 1, decline the offer. Option 2, provide the requested support. Option 3, provide support but at a lesser amount and or for a lesser duration. And that Council direct staff to negotiate a 3-part memorandum of understanding with the City of Welland and the YMCA, and that staff report back to Council with the memorandum of understanding in Q2 of 2023. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for discussion.
Before I turn it over to council, last night the City of Welland had their meeting and discussed this item, so I'll ask the CAO if he could update us on those results.
I did spend last night watching Welland's council meeting, and I'd just like to begin by thanking council for allowing me to work for the town of Pelham and saying how great it is to be here and that the grass is not greener when you go slightly further south. That being said, the city of Welland did support the Welland staff report, which is to say by a vote of either 8-3 or 7-3, they have agreed to support the YMCA in the schedule that is within the City of Welland staff report. So they've agreed in principle to 5 years of funding. And at this point in time, as a result of that direction, their staff have been directed to enter into an agreement with the YMCA and possibly Pelham, depending on the outcome of the discussion this morning, and ultimately whatever direction council sees fit to give. So Welland is in. Welland Council did add a caveat or further direction to staff, which we'll need to discuss this morning, essentially to add a caveat that should the YMCA fail, the City of Welland to get its money back. Obviously, any circumstance, and that can be addressed quite easily through a couple of clauses in any potential agreement, should we go down that road, to allow for the same protection for the town of Pelham. Obviously, it wouldn't be acceptable for us to for Welland to have priority in the, their council was concerned about a potential sale of the lands were the pool to close. That facility is more than a pool. There are a whole bunch of cognitive problems with that. Also, the lands to revert back to the college. Nevertheless, notwithstanding all the problems with that add-on motion, what I can say is that ultimately, if it is council's direction that we go with option 2 or 3, that staff would ensure that Pelham had the same protection that Welland does. And we can either take that as direction or you can bring a motion to that effect. But the key piece is that the City of Welland has agreed to support the YMCA for a period of 5 years with annual financing. So that's the summation, I suppose. Beyond that, we have a report obviously written prior to the publication of the Welland report, which had to be the dominant one. So there are more caveats in a report than either Ms. Van Ravensway, Ms. Quinlan Murphy, or I would submit to you in normal course of business. However, I still think it's reasonably clear there are really 3 ways forward. This council has received the delegation earlier from the YMCA requesting a certain level of funding. The choices are to provide no funding, to provide what was asked, or to provide something lesser. Those really are sort of the 3 options. And Ms. Van Ravensway, who's online, and Ms. Quinlan Murphy are very happy. Ms. Sturton, I suppose, if you have a specific technical question, but really the way we envision this is if it is the will of council to provide financial support, that we then get into the meat and bones of the agreement. None of us have actually, in a serious way, turned our mind to the actual agreement. That's just sort of a placeholder document to show you what something could look like. We haven't actually done any work on that, so don't worry about the specifics of that. That will be dealt with by a number of professionals, quite appropriately, if you end up with option 2 or 3, and if we end up with option 1, we'll all stop talking. So I will cease my remarks in hopes that there are questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cribbs. And I'll turn it over to council now with any comments or questions. Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. My concern about this, I watched the Welland Council meeting as well last night. I find this to be quite a deficient report, starting with the financial statements. I don't see anything, I would be looking for a source and application of funds or a balance sheet to go with it. I don't place a high value on the statement that they're going to get their money back. I think they'd line up as unsecured creditors in any event. So, you know, I don't have a lot of faith in that. We don't know enough about this organization. Is it I don't know what the structure is, the financial structure is. Not knowing the financial structure, I don't know if there's any alternatives been tried other than to come with a tin cup and ask us for more money again. And this is $500,000. The Y was failing. Their business model was failing before COVID. and it's very evident from the statements that we have, it was failing before COVID. It's a, what I would call a high cost, low service model that they're operating, and there are plenty of models around that people want, and they're going towards the high cost, high service model, or high cost, high service personal model. There's lots of low cost, convenient models around, but the model that they have there, I don't think it works, and I don't think it ever will work. So I won't be voting for anything in the absence of those kind of pieces of information. I'd like to know what the corporate structure is. I'd like to know where the money goes. I'd like to know what they exist on right now. They say they're existing on their own reserves. Well, we don't have really reserves to be putting forward $500,000 over 5 years ourselves. So why would we provide money to somebody who, excuse me, thought I turned that off. To somebody who has reserves of their own. So why would we advance money at this time? They say that they have their own reserves to cover them themselves. So I won't be supporting anything like this in the absence of the information. I think we need to make a proper decision with $500,000 of our taxpayers' money, which probably comes in at about 0.7% on our tax rate every year to supply that. So.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. I'm in agreement with what Councillor Olson has to say. I was part of the YMCA that left far before the pandemic hit. And the reason I left is their membership service levels declined, their costs increased, and it enticed many senior members like myself who were looking for good service at an affordable price to leave. In my view, their presentation or strategic plan did not demonstrate a plan that reinforced that their operational model is adapted to today's market. The basic plan still employs membership model. The model has failed in large cities recently like Niagara Falls and St. Catharines, and it's also failed in places like Windsor and Kingston. They have not changed their model. The market they're trying to compete for is things like low-cost gyms that are operating at a fraction of the price at $9.99 a month. They're competing against boutique gyms that are offering training, massage, chiropractic, and nurse practitioner services with no membership options. You just pay as you go. Then they're competing in Welland for their own community center, the Rose City Community Center, which has a basic membership fee of $25 a year. A family from Welland is $65, and a non-member is $84. It has a warm pool that has aquatic services and all the services that you'd ever want, and a hot tub. Now, it isn't a cold pool, which is a swim pool, but then you go to Brock University. If you register as a student, part-time or full-time, you have all the services available for you there. Or you can go there and take programs. You can take swimming. You pay as you go, and you get all the services, including a staff of +4 doctors on staff that you have access to if you're a member of Brock University of any extent. And so, in addition to not having a strategic plan that I believe that will work, that they presented to us, we do not have the financial reserve budget to offer luxury of supporting a non-essential service by taxpayers from the town of Pelham. Therefore, I will not be voting to support the YMCA based on the information we've been provided to by them at this date. And I don't think that their model that they've produced is a successful model for the future, even for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Councillor Eckert.
I agree with the statements made by Councillor Olson and Hildebrand. In addition, someone may be able to verify this, but it's my understanding that when the Y was first built, the town of Pelham made a substantial contribution over a 5-year period, and now they're back again. And when we look at, I think it's been well covered, the plans that they've put forward to us, but we're talking about less than 200 residents of Pelham that are members of the Y, and less than that are regular users of the pool facilities. So we're subsidizing, if we agreed to this, this would be well over $1 million that the town of Pelham has contributed. We have our own issues. Our staff is working very hard, but we have our own issues with the MCC. We've had reports from the treasurer that in the future, depending on how our revenue streams go, we may be paying that debt down with taxpayer money. I wouldn't not be in favor of increasing that taxpayer load by supporting the YMCA in Welland. I can't in good faith look at the businesses in Pelham that are running fitness facilities. What do we do when they come to us and say, hey, we're providing a good service here for the residents of Welland and we're in financial difficulty? Do we ignore them? Which we never have supported that. So for all the reasons stated by Councillors Hildebrand and Olson, plus what I've said now, I wouldn't be in support of this application either.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Niznik.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, a question just for our treasurer. This is not a budgeted item, and so if we did move forward with supporting the Y, where would those funds need to come from?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, right now it would be a negative budget variance to the town's budget for 2023. So it would come off of probably the working funds reserve, one of the reserves that we have. I would come out of there, but it's not currently budgeted for. So it will have a future impact that now that reserve, wherever it comes from, is not there. It'll be reduced by the $111,000. So we would have to relook at our numbers.
Thank you. So yes, so unfortunately, I don't really think we, the town of Pelham, have funds to support the Welland Y at this time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerr?
Yes, having been similar to Councillor Hildebrand, a member of WISE previously and then gone elsewhere, the most expensive part of the Y is the pool. And if you ask anyone at Brock University, the most expensive part of the operation at Brock is the pool. And if you know enough of the history back when Brock was built, they were handed the pool through a bequest by Eleanor Meisner. So they didn't have to pay for the pool. And then suddenly the university found out how expensive it was to maintain the pool, but it's pretty tough to close a pool down when you've been handed all this money as a bequest and it's named and et cetera, and its usage. But they openly admit that the pool never can carry its weight. And this is unfortunately a very similar situation, I believe, with the Y in Welland. We're looking at it. Comments have come up relative to the number of people that are members from Pelham. Is it proximity that makes it why it's more attractive to them? Nobody's really looked at, or is it the economics of that it's let's say below fair market value relative to the others, or they're attempting to compete in a market which they're not fully designed for. If we look at it, the only difference between the Y and what's available now that the town is undertaking with the Meridian Center is really the pool. Everything else is identical, and there are a number of small businesses that have opened up throughout the city of Welland, identifying that because they could provide very similar facilities for people at a better rate without the overhead costs. This seems to be a extremely high overhead situation that they're operating on, and I agree with Councillor Olson that the the business plan hasn't really been put forward of how they're going to actively and accurately get out of a negative cash flow situation, regardless of the supports of the City of Welland and the Town of Pelham. So I personally am not in favor of the request of $111,000 for 2023. I think we don't have the money. We all admit that we don't have the money. We did a rather lengthy soul searching to try and look at our own budget to try and come down. Some things that were eliminated from our budget were of contention among some, but we still wound up having to eliminate them because we said we just can't afford it at this time. So that's my difficulty. This one I concur with the other councillors talking about. Without a more proactive business plan, it's very difficult for the Town of Pelham to support for such a small proportion of residents that are identified as being using the facilities in any manner.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. So I'll throw my 2 cents in. Councillor Kerr's comments about pools are spot on. They are extremely expensive. You never make money running a pool. And quite frankly, the biggest attraction that the Y has at this point in time is the pool. Everything else, yeah, they run programs, but other agencies run programs that don't require a pool. I've got to put my finance hat on and look at the fact that this is a non-budgeted item. We cannot afford to drain our reserves for a facility in another community. And I don't think we can be going back to our taxpayers next year and the year after and the year after and explain that their taxes went up because we're supporting the YMCA in another community. So I, like the rest of council, will not be supporting this funding, and I will turn it over to Councillor Hildebrand to make the motion on what number to put in the.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I'll make the motion to select option 1.
And who was the seconder?
Councillor Kerr, do you concur with that amended motion?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair. So
for the vote.
With the amended motion, I'll just read it again. So Councillor Hildebrand moves, and seconded by Councillor Kerr, that be it resolved that council receive report 2023-0063 of the Chief Administrative Officer, and the council directs staff to move forward with option 1, which is decline the offer of financial support. If council's ready, I'll proceed with the vote. Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kerr? Yes. Councillor Niznik?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink?
Yes.
That motion is carried. Thank you. So we move to the next item on the agenda, which is unfinished business, nothing listed. 12, new business, nothing has been brought to our attention. Presentation and consideration of bylaws, item 13, no bylaws.
Oh, yes, sorry. Good catch. Capital budget request 10.1.6.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, I do have it right here in front of me. Sorry. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Eckhart and seconded by Councillor Olson. A recommendation, be it resolved that council receive the memo, Capital Project Pumper Tanker 3 for information, and that council approve the purchase of Pumper Tanker 3 for a total of $922,314, being that $22,314 is over the 2023 capital budget approval of the $900,000, and the council approve the overage of $22,314, and it be funded from the fire equipment reserve.
Any comments or questions with respect to this item? Seeing none.
Proceeding to the vote.
So just a question that we see that you did send out 8 RPFs and only 1 bid submission. Is there any chance of anyone else being able to put forth a bid? Or I know the bid closed, but because you've only received 1 bid, can you redo it or resubmit, or what? How does that go through you, Mr. Mayor or Deputy Mayor?
So through you, Mr. Oh, can I just answer? Sorry.
Yes.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not on. Oh, yes, I am. No, once the RFP is closed, it's closed. So they had the opportunity to submit. 8 took the plans and only 1 submitted. So that's what we have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn it to the clerk.
Okay, proceeding with the vote. We'll start again with Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr. Yes. Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Thank you. Now, being efficient, I've already covered 11, 12, and 13 on the agenda. Moving now to motions and notice of motion. So we have a notice of motion and now a motion before Councillor moved by Councillor Olson and Councillor Eckhart concerning Pelham Care's 40th anniversary. I would ask if Councillor Olson wants to read that resolution or if he'd like staff to.
I'll read it myself. Thank you. And thank you to the clerk for, the deputy clerk for helping me write this. The motion is, whereas Pelham Cares, Inc. is a nonprofit charitable organization serving the community of Pelham since April 18th, 1983. Whereas Pelham Cares endeavors to improve the quality of life and well-being of Pelham residents by offering food and hygiene products, youth sponsorship programs, and a range of social services not provided by other organizations or agencies. And whereas more residents are calling upon the support of Pelham Cares as a result of the global pandemic, financial insecurity, and the increasing cost of living. And whereas Pelham residents, service clubs, businesses in the town generously support and contribute to Pelham Cares through a variety of donations. And whereas the town of Pelham recognizes the dedication of Pelham Cares volunteers for their time and effort enhancing the town and encouraging residents to support one another. And whereas Pelham Cares will celebrate its 40th anniversary on April 18th, 2023 with a volunteer appreciation night as follows, to follow on May 24th, 2023. And therefore be it resolved that the town of Pelham hereby proclaims May 24th as Pelham Cares Day in celebration of 40 years of service to the Pelham community.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Councillor Olson, would you like to add any more comments with respect to your motion?
Yes, I would, Deputy Mayor. First of all, you could say this about so many of our charitable organizations and our service clubs in the community. I selected the idea of, I came upon this idea because the origination of the Pelham Cares as an organization came from the council and specifically the mayor of the town of Pelham. So there's a lineage that goes back to somebody seeing a need in our council who saw the need and asked for support in the community, and they came up with what we now call Pelham Cares. And it's something that I think we should recognize that lineage because it's going to become more and more important as we go on, and the need is growing. And I got the statistics from Pelham Cares recently, and they're reporting in 2022, which is now 3 months ago, a 28% increase in their overall services, a 67% increase in new individuals, a 53% increase in the number of children being served. And they had over 1,900 visits to the food bank in 2022. And the most alarming part of the statistics is what has happened in the first 3 months of this year, because they have an overall increase of 100% more new people have come to the services. The medical drives are up 23%. They provide transportation for medical appointments and things. And they have some needs that they're now hearing about that weren't common in the past. They're dealing with domestic abuse situations, shared housing, multiple people living in one house to subsidize rent costs, illnesses, grandparents taking care of grandchildren for various reasons on their fixed pensions, mental health issues, working families, for the first time, working families unable to support the family with their wages. Seniors, pensions not enough, need support for food and delivery. People on probation needing support to re-enter the community. Refugee families arriving in Canada within the week of arrival, they had to find housing within Pelham for a family. Post-secondary students not needing support for food because the expenses are too high. And death in the family, family separation, and relocation. So the need is tremendous, and I think we can be all very, very proud of the fact that our organizations in the town support this, and I'm proud of the fact that council has been so supportive of everything that our organizations in the community have done. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Quite alarming. There's always been a need, but the need is increasing exponentially, and just a shout out to the volunteers that work at Pelham Cares, but also the community. They've done a lot, but those who can do more, now's the time that there is a great need for it. So, Councillor Eckert, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, I was very pleased to second this motion by Councillor Olson. I have been a contributor, as most of us have been, to Pelham Cares over the years, both financially and with donations. They are an absolute wonderful organization with really great volunteers. We're blessed here in Pelham with our service clubs and charitable organizations, but Pelham Cares is right at the top of that list as far as I'm concerned. When I was in there before Christmas speaking with staff who were busy sorting all the donations that came in over the week period of the collection, one of the things they did talk about was one of the great needs is the medical drives to appointments. So if there are people out there that have the time and the means, please volunteer your time and assist our fellow residents here in Pelham. It's a great organization, and I'm proud to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Eckert. Anyone else like to make comments? Seeing none, to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll now move to the vote, starting with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Eckert.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Thank you. So we've had no items identified for in camera, so we'll move to the confirming bylaw, number 17 on the agenda. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being bylaw number 23/2023, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 22nd day of March 2023. If there's no questions or concerns, I will call the vote, starting with Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
And Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
That motion carries. Oh, sorry. Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. So now moving to number 18, the adjournment. I have a motion moved by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for April 5th, 2023 at 9 a.m. And I'll start the vote with Councillor Niznik,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes?
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
So